really grateful for.
Good evening, YouTube. It's Jacqueline Leah, aka Mrs. Dave the Lawyer. Happy Sunday. I hope everybody had a great weekend thus far. Thank you so much for joining me. Tonight, we are going to wrap up that hearing that we started on Friday night in regards to telecommunications. And then, just depending how long it is, I think we may have an hour or less left. I do have another hearing teed up all about healthcare, pensions, and contracting directly in order to help save money on healthcare. So that's coming up next, but let's continue where we left off about telecommunications.
The opportunity to meet with you and discuss, your district's challenges, especially as such a rural part of Virginia. And I really agree with you that different technologies are going to work in different areas. That was what the bipartisan Congress recognized in writing the BEAD law. It set out performance requirements that each technology had to meet. Our gold standard is ensuring that projects meet those performance requirements, but it didn't make sense given the diverse conditions of our country to force a one-size-fits-all solution down the states, especially as you mentioned that different technologies work differently. Fiber is an incredible technology, and indeed most of our program is fiber. But as we've seen, there have been incredible innovations in fixed wireless technology. A technology that just was seen as inferior now can provide gigabit service even in non-line of sight environments. And similarly with technology, with satellite, we've seen incredible increases in throughput and latency, new generations of satellites coming online, new launches. And I think it's just not correct or a reflection of reality to consider a single technology inferior. It's at odds with our America's historical approach to facilities-based innovation and competition that has made America's broadband the best in the world.
I appreciate it. Now let me shift to maybe a little more difficult subject because you've got good folks competing, but there have been some and you all have updated BEAD to provide guidance explicitly conditioning funding on following pole attachment statutes. Will you commit to referring entities for FCC enforcement and clawing back BEAD funding if pole attachment statutes are not followed by the BEAD grant recipients?
Yeah, so part of our role right now at NTI is oversight.
Let me just catch everybody up who wasn't listening in on Friday night. So this is a hearing that was from June 30th, so just a couple weeks ago, and it's about telecommunications and specifically about something called the BEAD Act. And this was enacted, I believe it was 2020, and the purpose of this act is to supply Americans, primarily rural Americans, with high-speed internet. So literally, the country was given like a huge budget allocation. We're talking about, multi-billions of dollars to get this initiative out so rural America could have high-speed internet. The issue that has arisen, though, is that it has taken a very long time to implement. And one of the reasons for that is under the Biden admin, for some reason, they were very, very, very gung-ho about only using fiber. Because when it first was enacted, Elon Musk had won a bid to implement Starlink in rural areas. And I think he was allotted like over 80 billion or something like that. But long story short, I think it was around 2022, they rescinded that offer, saying that they didn't want to go with satellite, that long-term fiber would be better, it could be upgraded more easily, and it would cost the American taxpayer less, which of course is not necessarily true. But there's been a lot of back and forth between the federal government and each state to try to implement this program, because there are certain rural areas where satellite just makes so much more sense. Like, it would just be faster, easier, much more cost effective. But Biden admin made states like go through all of these hoops in order to get approved for satellite and non-fiber methods. So this has delayed a lot of the efforts to get this high-speed internet to rural America. Now, when Trump became president again in 2025, his initiative is he wants to cut through, some of the red tape and not make the states go through all the paperwork and whatnot they went through under Biden. So things are moving along a lot faster than they were, but this initiative has taken a very, very long time to be implemented. Hopefully we're seeing more action because Trump made those changes. But let's continue. I just wanted to give you guys like the backstory of it.
And ensuring that projects are deployed in a timely and effective manner. And that part of that is working to figure out where there are challenges on the ground and working with companies and states to address those. We have a process in our rules and our terms and conditions specifically on addressing permitting challenges.
And last but not least, I will just note that I thought it was interesting, not only did we have delays in the Biden administration, but there were requests earlier for you to talk about some laws and where did you all get your authority? And I remember, because of the problem we had in Virginia with the Biden administration, that one of the things they were trying to force at that time was that there be a specific low-cost plan that met the approval of the Biden administration, and yet the law specifically prohibits you from, you're supposed to have a low-cost plan, but the law specifically prohibits you from deciding what that low-cost plan is, doesn't it?
I agree. The law specifically prohibits from rate regulating and micromanaging markets in that way. I think a bipartisan Congress recognized that that was not the right approach to to maximize participation and success in the program.
And I yield back.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the representative from California, Mr. Peters, for 5 minutes for your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Roth, for joining us today, and thank you also for meeting with me earlier on. In November 2021, Congress voted to invest over $42 billion to advance America's goal of universal broadband service, with over $1.8 billion reserved for California in the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, or BEAD program. And when I came to Congress, one of the things I heard all the time was about rural broadband. Republicans were really concerned about that. And in the pandemic, we learned that the digital divide wasn't just rural, urban. It was also, it existed in wealthy cities like my own. And so this is a really important thing. It was a huge advance. And I have to say, I was critical of the Biden administration's deployment of this. I was frustrated that after 3 years, we didn't have any projects in the ground. And the witness came here when the Republicans took the majority, and the Democratic witness said the states hadn't gotten through the paperwork yet. She said it was hard to do. And I thought that the criticism of the Biden administration was in many respects very fair. And this administration came in promising to speed up the timelines. And after months of silence on BEAD funding at the beginning of last year, NTIA requires states to go through an entirely new process, the benefit of the bargain round. And because of this additional round, states that were on the cusp of receiving funding at the beginning of 2025 were delayed by at least 11 months. Then NTIA missed its own deadline to issue non-deployment guidance by months. That threatened the ability of states to do critical permit process overhauls to ensure the success of the program. California has still not received its funding for this critical program. California is one of only 2 states that has yet to receive final proposal approval from NTIA. And we know that if California were to receive NTIA approval today, my state will still need to seek final approval from NIST, receive the notice of its award, sign its award agreement, a process that is likely to take anywhere from an additional 6 months to a year. That's if NTIA were to approve California's final plan today. After months of going back and forth between NTIA and California on its final proposal, With multiple rounds of curing earlier this spring, California thought it was nearing final approval. And then after months of silence from NTIA recently sent California a completely new round of curing requests with new issues and questions NTIA had never previously raised. So we all know California will not be seeing the money anytime soon, leaving our unserved and underserved rural and urban communities behind. Administrator Roth, can you explain how changes brought under your leadership have fulfilled your claims of accelerating BEAD deployment, and when should Californians expect to see shovels in the ground?
Thank you, Congressman, and it was great to talk to you in your office. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain some of the challenges that we've seen in California. I told you one of the challenges that I think you mentioned in our approach to curing was that there were some mapping anomalies. We found, we've oversight of the program, and conducting our due diligence is really important to ensure protection of taxpayer dollars. And there were several examples in California where there were requests for really exorbitant amounts of money, ostensibly to serve apartments in the middle of nowhere. And so we had to work with the state to ensure that we address those mapping challenges. We're working with the state. We look forward to receiving California's revised proposal so that we can get California and all states and territories across the finish line. But I think that the data speaks for itself with respect to expediting projects. Thanks to our restoring the program to its statutory mission, we've already seen.
You said that
deployment.
before. You said we've got projects in Louisiana, we got a project in Nebraska. And that, to me, that's not that great. Well, what we have now is, instead of a 3-year delay, we have a 5-year delay. The witness is here blaming the states. The witness is here telling about how it's hard. Same things we heard from the Biden witness when you all came into the majority. I hope you're not breaking your arms, patting yourselves on the back that this is better. This is the same. This is the same. We have instead of a 3-year delay, we have a 5-year delay. And I would love to see some of the same frustration that I showed with the administration of my own party on the other side of the aisle, to see the Republicans showing frustration with this implementation. Because this is unacceptable. It's as unacceptable as it was at the beginning of this term. I have more questions, but I'll submit them.
So a few things to keep in mind that we learned on Friday night, or if you originally listened to this hearing. So you're going to hear a lot of congressmen that are very frustrated because they want their constituents to have high-speed internet. This has been going on since 2020. Like I said, multiple billions of dollars have been allocated to get this initiative done. But there's been so much back and forth between the federal government and the states. It's just been completely inefficient. I mean, 6 years, almost going on 7 years, is a very long time for these people to wait to have this internet project done. It really is. That's a long time. That's slow even for the government. So you'll continue to hear how congressmen are asking when things are going to happen. Why is it taking so long? They're very frustrated, and I'm sure they're getting a lot of phone calls, from their constituents, depending on which state that they are in. The other thing I want to address too is we found out this morning that Senator Lindsey Graham did pass away. So I just want to take a moment to, recognize Senator Graham. I know that a lot of people feel differently about him. Some people really liked Lindsey Graham. Some people dislike Lindsey Graham. But the fact of the matter is Lindsey Graham has been around for a long time. He's been in politics for, I want to say maybe like 4 decades. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. Personally, my parents have met him on multiple occasions. This morning, my mom sent me a picture of her with Lindsey Graham from a few years ago. They've only had very positive things to say about him. The other thing that I just want to point out about Senator Graham, too, that I find very interesting is that it was reported today, and I don't know how accurate this number is, though, but it was reported earlier that his net worth was only, just over $1 million. Now, again, he's been in the Congress and the Senate for a very long time. And as we know, congressmen, senators, they make anywhere from, I think congressmen make about $174,000. I'm not sure exactly how much senators make. But what we see is that there are a lot of congressmen and senators that have been in office for a very long time, and their net worth has skyrocketed. And you guys know what I'm talking about. But we really didn't see that from Senator Graham. So it really does seem like the last, few years or few decades, he was truly working hard for the American people. And I'm sad to see him go. He definitely will be missed. Now, regardless of if you like him or don't like him, I just ask, if you're in my comments or you're on my live chat right now, please be respectful. I think it's in really poor taste to just say something negative about somebody that just was deceased. So, if you make those comments, I'm just letting you guys know that you're probably going to be kicked out of the chat tonight. This is very fresh, and it's just disrespectful, and I don't want that kind of energy here. But anyways, let's move on with the telecommunications hearing.
I'm writing a yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Representative Fulcher for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Administrator Roth, I want to start with a thank you. In May, we had sent an inquiry in regard to the possible use of next generation 911 deployment, and didn't get a full answer yet for a number of reasons. However, you were very responsive, and just the response means a lot, keeping us cued in on the status. In my state, we have a lot of rural space, and the rural broadband deployment is a big, big deal. In addition to being a member of Energy and Commerce, I'm also on Natural Resources, and one of the things that we struggle with is a permitting process for this deployment. That's a huge issue for us, and a huge issue in terms of how this deployment is handled, the timeliness of which it's handled, and whatnot. To what extent is NTIA involved, or suggestions have you got in regard to working with federal, state, for this permitting process? A lot of this is on or related to federal land. We've got about 34 million acres of that. To what extent is NTIA involved with that, and what's happening there?
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. So permitting is front and center of our efforts to expedite deployment in the BEAD program. We're really focused on, not just getting paperwork out the door, but actual deployment. And we know that permitting has been one of the historical challenges when it comes to broadband deployment. What we've done at NTIA is we've introduced a cloud-based software tool to really expedite and automate the permitting process. We have 47 categorical exclusions that will apply to, we estimate, about 95% of BEAD projects. And through our software tool, we've seen really a much more expeditious process. For a process that used to be email-based and took 3 to 6 months is now taking 48 hours, according to one of the state broadband directors. And the proof is in the data. There were 25,000 locations just got through our permitting process thanks to that tool. And we're working with other federal agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service, National Council on Historic Preservation, to expedite things at the federal level. But as you said, there are also a lot of challenges at the state and local level. And so we are working with states to streamline processing, expedite timelines, reduce permitting costs, because ultimately that's what will make the BEAD program successful and avoid defaults. And I also commend this committee's efforts to address some of those challenges through its legislation.
Okay. Our experience is most of those challenges on permitting have been federal, but understand that there's also the state and local. Just keep that in mind. It's a big issue for us in rural Idaho. Shifting gears a little bit, you'd referenced the study, or that's been talked about briefly, but the One Beautiful Bill calls for a study of the 2.7 megahertz band. What's the timeline on that in terms of completing that study?
So we are working aggressively to complete that study and get spectrum identified in that band. We actually just finished the 60-day congressional notification process to get SRF funding to incumbent agencies, NOAA and the FAA, so that we can complete the requisite studies and identification and get the spectrum auction. It's certainly one of the bands that we're working with the FCC to get auctioned as soon as possible.
What's the speed bumps in that regard? Is it personnel? Is it lack of responsiveness from other entities?
No, I think one of the benefits of the president's leadership on spectrum and his presidential memorandum on winning the 6G race is that he's really identified getting spectrum auction as a national priority. And so we're working really cooperatively with other agencies, including the incumbents, to get their systems upgraded and the spectrum identified for auction. And we're also really working very closely with the FCC on this to figure out ways to expedite timelines and achieve the goal of 5 auctions during this administration.
Okay, I do have a question on 1675 megahertz and 70 gigahertz, but I'm going to put that in writing because my time is up. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Carter, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister Roth, for joining us today. In January 2025, Louisiana became the first state in the nation to secure federal approval for a plan to deploy $1.3 billion in funding under the Original Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, or BEAD program, a program that designed to ensure that everyone, regardless of zip code, has access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. But instead of building on that progress, the Trump administration forced states to do years of approval planning, which delayed deployment and caused unnecessary uncertainty. While Louisiana's revised plan has now been approved again, roughly $800 million in Louisiana's BEAD non-deployment funding remains frozen. Those dollars were meant to expand telehealth, strengthen workforce development, improve digital skills, and help rural and underserved communities fully participate in today's economy, not sit idle. These delays are unacceptable. Every day, they continue to cost communities the connectivity, growth, and opportunity they deserve. Administrator Roth, Louisiana kept its bargain in a bipartisan manner, first under Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards, and then Republican Governor Jeff Landry. We worked with state, local, and federal partners to become the first state in the nation with approved BEAD plan. Our communities have done their part. Why hasn't NTIA done theirs? What's the holdup in releasing the deployment funds?
Well, thank you, Congressman. Louisiana has, as you've seen, been extremely successful in its final proposal. The governor of Louisiana has spoken publicly about the benefits of the bargain reforms in promoting ubiquitous connectivity across the state, and we've already started to see deployment. We want to ensure that
I'm sorry, I have about 2 minutes left. Can you just tell me what's the holdup, respectfully?
we're trying to get the guidance right, not just rush money out the door, because
But when the Biden administration was trying to get the guidance right, you said you were wasting time. You can't have it both ways. Let me ask you a quick question, yes or no? Can you assure me that Louisiana will receive its full BEAD allocation, including the $800 million in non-deployment funds?
So Congress allocated
So
funding
can you assure
to
us
the
that we'll
states.
get it? We have. So
Yes.
now it's in your part. Can you assure me and the people of Louisiana that the $800 million in non-deployment funds will be unfrozen?
The states will get their money according to the
So
law.
that's a yes?
Yes, we are
Okay, thank you.
fully
That's good.
intent.
Thousands of rural economically disadvantaged locations in Louisiana were initially slated.
So I'm going to look this up while we're listening, but this is really interesting. Like, why was that money frozen? It does seem very fishy that it's taken them so long, nearly 7 years, and now, this congressman's talking about the 800 million was frozen. So, when I was researching this the other day, what I came across is long term, yes, fiber makes the most sense for certain areas. More populated areas would do better with the fiber because it's easier to upgrade, and the cost per month for the American citizens, because they're paying, so our government, I mean, it's really us though, is paying for the installation, but we, the user, have to pay, the monthly subscription fee. But it's still all of our money anyways. But anyways, so the argument was fiber was supposed to be less expensive for the consumer on a monthly basis. I don't 100% believe that though, because I have a feeling they could have gone back to Elon Musk and negotiated like a lower monthly rate for Starlink. But this is the thing. So Starlink is so much less expensive to install their devices versus fiber. Like the difference between $550 to send and install a Starlink device versus it could be up to $50,000 to install those fiber cables, just depending on the area. So that's a huge difference. So to my understanding, what the Trump admin's trying to do, but apparently they're not doing a great job either, was allow the states to determine easier, without having to show so much justification, that there's just some areas that fiber is going to be super expensive and Starlink is just going to be faster and the way to go. But again, I feel like there's much more to this hearing than what we're seeing right now, and I'm going to do some more investigating on this. But it seems really fishy. It seems really fishy. It's really inefficient. And you can see from every congressman that's coming up, they're very frustrated. They're upset. And they're not really getting the answers during this hearing.
For fiber in January 2025 have now, under the benefit of the bargain round, had BEAD funding diverted to Elon Musk's satellite services. How do you justify delivering lower quality broadband to rural and underserved communities under BEAD when higher performance options like fiber are available and states like mine are willing and able to invest in rural communities?
As I've said, performance is the gold standard, and the law was written in a tech-neutral way, and our job is to ensure that every last community gets priority broadband service.
But how do you justify going to an inferior product over a more superior product?
Well, different types of technologies work better in different communities. Fiber can be great. In some places, it's really exorbitant. And, there was an example in Louisiana where...
Would you agree that Louisiana had passed all of its tests, was ready for everything to go, had shovels ready to go on ground? So what's different now? The only thing different now is a new administration that clearly wants to put his fingerprint on it, and I'm fine with that. But don't send us backwards when, in fact, Louisiana, under a Democratic governor and a Republican governor, did all the right things, and now the people of Louisiana are being punished, one, with a delay, two, with $800 million in non-deployment funds being frozen, and three, now getting an inferior product. That doesn't sound like progress. That sounds like gamesmanship.
We agree nobody should be punished, but we disagree that putting a mandate on a single technology means better outcomes. In Louisiana, allowing fixed wireless to participate in the program not only brought down costs, but it also expedited deployment in the states.
Respectfully, you mentioned in your comment that Louisiana got it right. You mentioned in your comment that you acknowledged that we were first, that we got it right. But now we're being punished by getting an inferior product after.
Okay, so let me clarify, because I've got some more information about what he's talking about. So he's really frustrated right now. He's a representative from Louisiana because Louisiana was actually the first state to get approved for this BEAD funding. And they have been going back and forth when Biden was in office and now with Trump to do all the steps that they had to do to prepare for this initiative. And they, it seems, did a lot, did everything, you know, by the book, everything that they were told to do, they've done. So there's been years of planning and making sure that they were following the rules, because as we learned on Friday, they could have done it on their own in their own way, but of course these states are choosing to accept federal funding, and when you accept federal funding, you have to play by the federal rules. So in this act, there's all kinds of rules and regulations and things that they had to do exactly a certain way in order to actually get that funding. So they did all that. So again, you can see he's like very, very frustrated. I would be too, of course. But what he's saying isn't 100% the whole story. So they were actually allocated over $1.3 billion. And when Trump took office and was revising the BEAD Act, he did put a hold on $800 million. And the reason for that is he was rewriting the rules, and he was actually trying, well, supposedly, he was trying to make it easier for them to do what they needed to do to make this happen. So the other thing, though, is they were rewriting the BEAD rules to eliminate what they considered unnecessary regulatory requirements and allowing technologies such as fixed wireless and low Earth orbit satellite like Starlink to compete more fairly with fiber. And the actual goal was, though, to reduce the overall cost. So actually, with the new rules, Louisiana will be saving $800 million because they don't have to just do the fiber like they would have had to under Biden. Actually, in Louisiana, it's deemed that Starlink or something like Starlink satellite internet is going to be the best option for them. And I actually agree with this just from personal experience living in an area that is prone to hurricanes. The fiber internet isn't always the best. And when we had those big hurricanes in 2024, Helene and Milton, where a lot of Florida was flooded and under a lot of water, it probably took over 2 months for my area to be completely restored with internet. We actually did end up buying on our own a Starlink satellite. And we have that. We don't use it primarily as our internet, but we have it as like a backup because the fiber's just, unfortunately, it's just not, we're not going to keep our internet during those floods. So Louisiana is kind of in the same boat. You know, they're very prone to storms, had massive flooding and, massive hurricanes. So for a state like that, it just makes more sense for them to go with Starlink. And if they utilize Starlink instead of putting in all the fibers like we discussed, they will actually be saving $800 million. So to my understanding, that money is being looked at right now to determine, okay, is all of that really going to be needed for this project? We're not going to take it away from Louisiana, but maybe we can reallocate it to something else that they need. So that's the truth behind what's going on with their BEAD money. And it's a lot. I know it's a lot, and I understand why these guys are so frustrated because this has been a lot of back and forth. But ultimately, I think what Trump is trying to do is cut costs where he cannot take away that funding from the states, but just not be wasteful and reallocate it to other things that they need. That's what it appears to be what's going on.
The fact, when in fact, we'd gone through all those batteries of tests, all of those hoops, all of those jumps among two different administrations, only to find it rechecked, redone, and now we're getting less money inferior product, that's just not cool. I'd love to meet with you, Administrator Roth, and have a more in-depth conversation. My time has expired now. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. I'd let the witness take a few seconds if you'd like to respond to that.
I guess I welcome the opportunity to meet with you. Our view is that performance is the gold standard, and I think that the view that, one technology is a one-size-fits-all solution or future-proof just doesn't reflect reality when we've seen incredible amounts of innovation in diverse technologies. Even in the last 5 years, we've seen incredible progress in fixed wireless, a service that's become extremely popular among consumers and is increasingly becoming viable and scalable. And the same goes with respect to satellite. We've been seeing incredible increases in the technology that I think weren't anticipated several years ago. And I think that goes to show the importance of taking a non-distortionary, tech-neutral approach to the program that recognizes diverse conditions in the country and also doesn't put a thumb on the scale for innovation. Innovation
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, if you're going to give the witness an opportunity to continue to speak.
Sir, I gave you an
But you
additional
didn't
minute
answer
and a
my
half.
question. You just gave her an opportunity for
Well, I
comment.
gave her the opportunity to answer your
No,
question.
you gave her an opportunity for
Well,
commentary.
the gentleman is not recognized.
Well, I'd ask you
Chair
to
recognizes the gentleman from
answer the
Florida,
question
Mr.
and
Bilirakis.
not offer commentary.
Thank you.
Gentleman is not recognized. Mr. Bilirakis, you
Thank you,
recognize for
Mr.
5
Chairman. I
minutes.
appreciate it very much. In coordination with the NTIA and the FCC, for the past several years, I've been working on legislation that would continue to address tweaks to our telecommunications networks by the Chinese Communist Party and other countries of concern. That work has ultimately led me to the Firewall Act, introduced today by myself and Congressman Soto, who happens to be on the full committee. The Firewall Act would forever ban.
So I forgot to bring this up also. So the other thing that we learned on Friday and from the hearing before with deepfakes, and this is really important. I'm sorry, I forgot to say it at the beginning. But the other factor to keep in mind is right now the US is in a race with China to be the most advanced in tech. So it's very important to our governments and to these states that everybody has high-speed internet. How can we be, the best in technology if all of our citizens don't have access to high-speed internet? So that's a big part of this hearing, and it's been a big part of a lot of the hearings recently. It's kind of like, our race to get to the moon, years ago against Russia. We want to beat China. We want to beat them when it comes to any type of technology, especially high-speed internet and especially AI. So we have this race going on right now where we just need to be the best of the best, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but they want to do everything possible so we continue to be number one when it comes to advanced tech and high-speed internet. So that is the underlying factor here that I just want you guys to keep in mind about.
And federal telecommunications funding from companies that choose to purchase fiber optic cable from China. Now is the perfect time to implement such a ban, since Chinese fiber is only a small percentage of the United States market today. Let's not make the same mistake twice. We must end this before we're struck with another multi-billion-dollar rip and replace type program. Assistant Secretary Roth, question again. Can you discuss some of the threats that exist and could exist with the systemic use of Chinese-produced fiber optic cable? And what are your thoughts on instituting a funding ban on companies that choose to ignore these risks? Please.
Thank you, Congressman, for your leadership. The fiber supply chain is something that NTIA closely monitors in our administration. The BEAD program, fiber is critical infrastructure, and it's passive, but we should still be very deliberate in terms of whether of looking at the supply chain and ensuring that federal dollars don't deepen reliance on untrusted supply chains and Chinese influence. I think the broader lesson of the past decade is that building a trusted supply chain is less expensive in the long run in terms of unwinding dependence later. And I haven't had a chance to look into your legislation yet, but I look forward to looking into it and would stand ready to be of assistance, especially as we've looked at these supply chain issues in the context of the BEAD program.
Yeah, I look forward to the conversation. Thank you. As a member of the China Select Committee, I'm concerned about the World Radio Communication Conference being hosted in Shanghai and how China is using its position to undercut American connectivity priorities, including Wi-Fi, satellite, and other technologies. Again, Secretary Roth, what steps is the administration taking to ensure that the United States and our allies will be able to fully participate in Shanghai?
Thank you. It's such an important question and an issue that this administration has prioritized. One of the things is that we need to ensure is that we build a coalition support around our positions going into WRC. And we're actively doing that. NTIA recently held a training with 27 regulators from 20 different African countries to work on building support for U.S. strategic priorities when it comes to commercial space, given that the WRC agenda is going to be so satellite focused. And we also equally are working on finalizing our positions on agenda item 1.7, which focuses on the future of 6G, given that strategic importance to us. So we are working to finalize our positions in advance of CTEL in the fall. But it's not just finalizing positions that's important, also ensuring effective leadership at the ITU, and so we are working to promote U.S. leadership in ITU elections, including through our participation at the Plenipotentiary Conference in the fall. We are working across our work streams to advance American leadership at the ITU, as well as other standard-setting bodies like 3GPP. Telecom is global in nature, and ensuring that global standards reflect our strategic priorities is incredibly important to U.S. economic and national security.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate your participation today, and thank you for holding this hearing, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Michigan, Representative Dingle, for 5 minutes for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for having this hearing, and thank you to the administrator for being here today. This committee has a responsibility to conduct oversight of NTIA. And as many on this committee know, we've made significant progress under the last administration, and I hope we can keep moving forward in the right direction on broadband deployment, affordability, mapping, and spectrum policy. I want to talk specifically today about BEAD implementation in Michigan, which I've discussed with you before, Madam Administrator, and the importance of continued coordination between NTIA and the states to ensure that the projects are moving forward. Michigan will connect nearly 200,000 locations through the BEAD program, the third highest number of eligible locations in the country. Michigan secured $920 million in federal funding and more than $550 million in private investment for a total of $1.47 billion. This funding will support over 31,000 miles of new fiber infrastructure across our state. However, states are still awaiting the guidance regarding the allowable uses of BEAD non-deployment funding. The Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act is clear that these funds can support complementary efforts like expanding permitting capacity, workforce development, digital adoption, mapping, and planning that are necessary to close the digital divide. You've said that speed is your priority, but since NTIA paused the use of non-deployment funds in June 2025, the revised BEAD policy notice that month, states have been left without clear direction on how to move forward. NTIA also missed your imposed self-deadline of March 26 to issue updated guidance created uncertainty for states attempting to plan around more than $20 billion in remaining non-deployment funding. I'm sure states, including Michigan, are ready, I know they are, to put resources to work alongside deployment projects to ensure communities can fully access and benefit from reliable, affordable broadband service. Administrator Roth, can you provide a timeline on when NTIA expects to issue updated guidance on non-deployment funding and how NTIA is working with states to ensure these funds can be used effectively and consistent with congressional intent without further delays?
Thank you, Congresswoman Dingle, and thank you for meeting with me in your office. These funds were freed up because our benefit of the bargain reforms were so successful in driving down costs and ensuring universal connectivity. And we want to ensure that these remaining funds produce the same measurable wins for taxpayers. And we're actively working on the guidance right now to use these dollars responsibly. As you know, we received an unprecedented amount of feedback on potential ways the dollars should be used. So we've just been focused on getting our guidance right at this point, which has taken additional time. And so we are, and you asked about a timeline, as I said to Chairman Hudson, we expect to release the guidance this summer.
I'm going to hold you to that. I've also heard concerns about the process requiring states to remove locations from BEAD projects when changes are made to the FCC broadband service location fabric, even in situations where those homes or businesses clearly need service. Can you tell us how NTI is working with states to ensure that technical or mapping revisions do not unintentionally leave eligible communities behind? And are you considering additional flexibility for states to address these situations?
Thank you. So in the BEAD law requires us to follow the FCC maps and also run a challenge process in determining which areas we're going to be eligible for BEAD funding. That was important for two reasons. First of all, we needed to give bidders the certainty they needed to know what they were bidding on, and also to ensure that there was a requisite challenge process to ensure that the program wasn't engaged in overbuilding. And so, maps are constantly changing as conditions change. We regularly update the FCC with our data and where BEAD deployments are occurring. And, our eligible areas, given that, may not match up perfectly with the FCC maps, but that's because of the need to, that's because we were required to run a challenge process. Given that such changes happen over time, one of the ideas that's been proposed for the remaining funds has been a cleanup round to address locations that have, become potentially unserved after we established eligible areas in the BEAD program.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the representative from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for 5 minutes for your questions.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Assistant Secretary Roth. I want to thank you for your efforts to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse. Specifically, and it's been talked about today, the efforts here on BEAD-funded projects with, just the wastefulness that you've uncovered, that you're preventing, and delivering the intended dollars to rural areas that truly need it. So thank you for that. I want to kind of shift gears. I've heard from domestic manufacturers who invested tens of millions of dollars in new equipment facilities to supply BEAD projects with American-made optical fiber, and they did so based on the assurances that domestic fiber supply would be available to support them, and that supply hasn't materialized. And now there's idle equipment and unfilled jobs sitting on the sidelines. So just from your perspective, based on what NTIA is seeing today, are those supply commitments being met? And if not, can NTIA act to help that? And are there examples where NTIA would consider a targeted waiver to support American manufacturing jobs?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for meeting with me and for your kind words on addressing waste in the BEAD program. Effective oversight of the program is so critical to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly and also ensure
But do we feel like taxpayer dollars are being used responsibly if we've allocated billions and billions of dollars in 50 states and essentially the money is just sitting there or just frozen? Is that really a good use of our money? I mean, I obviously I don't think so. And it really seems like the disconnect here and where things were really messed up was so much oversight. All of these rules and regulations and steps that these states had to do to prepare just seems very egregious and overdone. And now that Trump changed things, they had to go back and change stuff again, delaying the process. And you can see when we're listening to these guys how frustrated they are. You know, I just don't think that they're doing a great job with the oversight that they're doing to ensure that things work properly. And I would put money on guessing that it's probably going to have a lot of problems. There's going to be a lot of things that are missed, especially since the rules have been changed in the middle of this project. I think that we're not getting all the information. I think that there's like a lot of things that they're not telling us because they haven't really gone into detail about like what they're doing to ensure that everything is done correctly. The other thing that was brought up also, and I would love everybody's opinion in the chat, is we're getting the fiber from China. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What can the Chinese put in the fiber to make it work better or work worse? Like, it's very weird what's going on right now in our country, to be honest, because we're in this like war with China in some ways. You know, like the Trump admin and the media as well, they've been feeding us a lot of propaganda about how China's really bad, they're a communist country, they're trying to hurt American citizens. You don't want to buy stuff from China because, you know, they could poison us, and we need to be really weary about China because they can hack us and they're copying our intellectual property. They don't pay their fair share. We need to tax them more. You know, we've heard all of this for many years now. But in reality, we're very dependent on China. We purchase a lot of our goods from China. We purchase a lot of very important goods from China. So if they're really such a threat and they're so bad, why are we continuing to utilize them? Again, I don't have all the answers. I want to hear your guys' opinion. I just think that we're getting a lot of misinformation from all sides. I don't know what the end goal is, because we are very dependent on China. Are we taking steps to not be as dependent? It doesn't seem like we are. It seems like we're just being scared as consumers, but we all are buying and utilizing stuff from China every single day of our lives. So I don't know what the purpose is and why they're scaring us. Because if it was that much of a threat, then we would be forced to find alternative countries or create stuff on our own, but we are not doing that. We are not doing that whatsoever. So again, it's just something for you guys to think about. I definitely want to hear everybody's opinions in the chat.
For universal connectivity, because there were projects that were, if we hadn't done so, there had been a risk raised by the OIG that we would run out of money, which I think no one on this committee would have wanted. In terms of fiber and availability, we want to ensure that projects are deployed expeditiously, so we've actively monitored the fiber supply chain in the program, and fiber producers have given us their word that fiber will be delivered on time to BEAD projects, and we expect them to honor their commitments.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Some of the companies have not met their contractual requirements. So would you see a case where if those domestic manufacturers, don't do that and they have a contract with the government with the BEAD program? I mean, are there waivers that y'all would consider for the specifically for Made in America type issues?
NTIA has an ability to, there's a process for waiving BABA, or the Buy America provisions as you referenced, but we don't anticipate a waiver at this point as long as domestic manufacturers step up as they've promised. I think it also goes to show the importance of having, a mix of technologies in the program. Putting our eggs in one basket, I think wouldn't have been a good outcome for ensuring expeditious and timely deployment of universal broadband.
Thank you, and we'll certainly be watching that and working with you. One of our top legislative priorities is the Protocol Act, which would consolidate the FCC's broadband maps and NTIA's data into a single and consistent and reliable source. The bill would also require other federal broadband agencies to use this unified data. It would work with the states. It would do the work of trying to consolidate this. So my question, currently more than 130 broadband programs exist across 15 different agencies. So you can, the consolidating it and understanding it and gleaning the important pieces of vulnerabilities or gaps is really important on it. From your perspective at NTIA, what's the benefit of requiring other agencies to coordinate with NTIA and use a single harmonized broadband data set when planning and funding infrastructure projects?
Thank you for your leadership on this issue of mapping. It's so important to have accurate data in order to ensure that federal dollars are protected. Given that challenge that you referenced of the multiple different programs, 100 different broadband programs across 15 different agencies. So that risk is quite real. We have relied on the FCC maps and run a challenge process in our administration of BEAD. We work with the FCC, but definitely welcome the opportunity to work with you. And thank you for your leadership on potential ways to make mapping even better.
Thank you. Lastly, I'm out of time, but I'll submit a question for the record dealing with the BEAD program and the money that Texas has promised to match, which is $1.5 billion, just to make sure that the federal and the state pools of money are deconflicted. So I'll submit that for the record. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the representative from Ohio, Mr. Landsman, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Administrator Roth. I'm going to start with the cybersecurity work. This is a huge concern of mine. The current system is a patchwork, and across several agencies in terms of reporting, prevention, mitigation efforts. There's been some discussion about expanding your role, the administration's role, in dealing with the cybersecurity threats, protecting us. Can you talk a little bit about what that would look like? Whether NTIA's role would be expanded, what that would look like, your approach, your thinking on this?
No, thank you. This is a really important issue. NTIA, we're not a regulator, but we do play a role in ensuring secure networks. In BEAD, for example, states are required to get attestations from BEAD providers that they have cybersecurity risk management plans in place, as well as similar plans for supply chain risks. And NTIA also works on cybersecurity in the context of our communications supply chain risk information program. We provide information on latest best practices to companies, including small and rural communities. So I think we do play and could continue to play a really important role in terms of training and providing information on best practices and as well as on supply chain risk.
But you'd welcome the role of expanding some of the work that you guys are doing in cybersecurity if the DHS CERCIA rule includes an expanded role for you all? Not a leading
I
question,
haven't
assume,
had
yeah.
an opportunity to dig in on that issue, but I would be happy to get back to you more in depth on that.
Yeah, I would love to keep the conversation going because it does seem like additional leadership is needed, that you all do play, but could play an even bigger role. The reporting requirements piece is a challenge as, folks who experience an attack or believe there's an issue. The reporting requirements differ by agencies, and I have a bill that would streamline that. So there's just the one reporting protocol. How important do you think that is? In terms of what you hear and see on a daily basis.
I think that generally speaking, streamlining reporting requirements is a really great way to advance efficiencies and promote American technology leadership.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. One last thing, we have a bill that would make it easier to get broadband out to communities, our Rail Act, which I think we talked about. It takes advantage of the public right-of-way and streamlines the process for getting that broadband over the railroad tracks, which has become a challenge because the railroad companies oftentimes take forever and upcharge these providers. How important that's for the FCC, but obviously something similar would apply to what you all are doing. Are you seeing opportunities to do similar sort of reforms in terms of getting the broadband out?
Yes, this has been a very strong focus of NTIA. As you know, permitting is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to effective and expeditious deployment of broadband. We focused on what we can do at the federal level to streamline permitting, particularly through automating certain processes and working with other agencies. But as you recognize, the state and local and challenges can be even greater. And
You may have done this before, but have you submitted your list of permitting reform recommendations to this committee?
I have not, but I would
Yeah.
welcome the opportunity.
I think that would be
with
great.
this.
Yeah, I would. We'll follow up.
Great.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now.
So I don't know if you guys follow what happens in other states, but permitting is a huge issue in many states. And it's kind of weird if you think about it. It just makes me think, are we really free here? Or how much freedom do we actually have? Now, depending on your state, and of course, if you live in a homeowners association, that's a whole other ballgame. But a lot of states have or it's not even the state, it's your county or your city. And sometimes you have county rules and you have city rules depending on the location you live in. So, you're dealing with so many layers of rules, federal rules, state rules, city rules, county rules, and it's a lot for people to navigate. So, for instance, let's say I wanted to, build something in my backyard. I can't just build it. I have to get an engineer to come here and sketch it out, pay $750, have it stamped, and then get a permit for them to even build anything. Or if I just wanted to fix something in my house, a lot of times I have to have it sketched out and approved by the city or the county. And to be honest, in my area, they have a pretty inefficient way of doing things in their processes. In some places, you can't even talk to a real human being. Now it's, automated with AI or chatbots or whatnot, so it can be very frustrating. Not to mention, if you have to upload something in like a portal, you have to have like a specific size and format, but they don't tell you that before you do it. You just get like an error message. So I'm sure that that happens in a lot of places throughout the country. But the point of all this is we have so many rules and regulations, and most people don't even know it until they have a project that they want to complete. And if you've been following like Spencer Pratt and what was going on with him after the Palisades fires, he's had a lot of issues with trying to rebuild his home because of all of those permitting rules and all the laundry list of rules and regulations they have in California. And on top of all that, like I mentioned earlier, you have to pay, you know, all these fees, a processing fee, a permit fee, this and that. Everything is a fee. And even if they don't approve it, you still have to pay that fee. So, I mean, it's a lot. It's exhausting. I really feel for these states. Like, it sounds like they have really, really been put through the ringer with all of this. This is a massive project that they're not doing a very good job. And I'm saying they are not, our federal government. They need to do something to fix this. This has gone on for too long. And if we want to be the best in tech and beat China, you know, we got to speed things up. We got to get it together. We have to get these states the internet services that we promised everybody.
I recognize the representative from Texas, Mr. Goldman, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today, Ms. Roth. Texas is facing uncertainty around the release of BEAD funds necessary to manage program changes, rebid 31,000 locations, and keep broadband deployment projects on schedule. What is causing these funds to be held up, and how will NTIA ensure that any delays do not make it harder for Texas to reconnect these vacant locations or leave Texans with lower quality service options?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for meeting with me. Texas was able to submit a very successful final proposal. They were actually the last state to submit their initial proposal under the previous rules, but because the state really did a really amazing job of looking at each project area by project area closely and evaluating every technology in every different area. The state produced really incredible results and has a really diverse mix of technologies reflecting the diverse topography and geography of the state. And they're achieving universal access with a 32% match, which is above the statutory requirement, is a really great indication of the project's sustainability and success. And so right now, the state is signing contracts with providers. That can be a challenging process, and NTIA has stood ready to help the state whenever there have been, and providers whenever there have been issues or questions. But ultimately, thanks to our work to streamline permitting, we expect to see contracts signed, and I think Texas is one of the states that already has a contract signed with a LEO provider enabling instant access to BEAD service.
Thank you. And following up on that, Texas being a national leader in wireless innovation, semiconductor manufacturing, telecommunications, as you know, NTIA's spectrum decisions will directly affect jobs and investment across our state. As NTIA implements the spectrum provisions that we passed last year and evaluates the 2, 4, and 7 gigahertz bands, can you update us on the progress of that work and how would implementing these provisions advance U.S. and Texas leadership in 5G and 6G and next generation community technologies?
Yeah, no, as you said, Texas is a leader when it comes to technological innovation. I actually recently visited the Ericsson 5G factory, which was so incredible to see the kind of automation that the factory automation that is bringing next generation connectivity to the state and to the country and the world. I think, as you said, as you mentioned, getting our spectrum identified under the Working Families Tax Cut Act is the best way that we can, is one of our best ways to promote that continued innovation, increase economic growth, promote national security, as well as domestic jobs. And so we're laser focused on completing that identification and getting more spectrum into the marketplace as quickly as possible so that the U.S. can continue to lead in this area.
Thank you. And since you've joined NTIA, how have you seen the BEAD program change, and what steps does NTIA need to take to make sure communities are getting connected?
We've seen incredible success through our stripping out of red tape, removal of burdensome rules, allowing the states to determine, like Texas, which technologies would work in different parts, in different project areas. And we've seen results from that. We're getting deployment out the door, as we've seen deployment in multiple states already, and that was thanks to our embracing an all-of-the-above solution to the program, consistent with how Congress wrote the law. We're very excited about the deployment that we're starting to see and we'll continue to see in the months ahead.
Great. Thank you again. Thanks for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield back to.
So I've been doing some more research, while this hearing is going on. And one thing that I do want to bring up is that we do produce fiber cables here in the U.S. We have, a handful of manufacturers that create them on a large scale. And in order to receive the federal funding for BEAD, states had to use U.S.-made fiber cables, which, of course, I don't think anybody would argue that that was a bad thing. That's a good thing. And especially if we're concerned with, China doing anything nefarious with technology, it would make sense that we would only use American-made. But the thing that just, I don't know, I don't want to say it makes me angry because I've been angry about it since hearing about it, but I did a stream last month where we uncovered, and I guess I should have known this, but I think most Americans don't, where we uncovered that the majority of our generic prescription drugs come from offshore, specifically China and India. And when they hit the shore, the FDA does not have any rules or mandates in place that they're independently tested. So we actually have no idea what's in generic drugs that get manufactured offshore. We have no idea because we don't test them. There's just no rules. Once they come here, they get, dispensed to our children, our seniors, you, me, everybody. And we actually have no idea what's really in them. And in that hearing, I think it was called poisoned pills. You can, if you go into my lives, you'll see it. We did 2 or 3 days on that stream. But there was an expert in that hearing that was talking about how she had done studies and she believes that patients are actually being poisoned by these generic drugs because there's inactive ingredients in it that are just causing cancer, more heart issues, dementia. And where do we draw the line? Why is that acceptable? It's acceptable that we just give our citizens whatever. I don't understand why that is acceptable, but we're very, very concerned about technology and fiber cables while we're literally poisoning and killing our citizens. And it doesn't seem to be a big enough issue that Congress or the Senate has done anything about it yet. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts.
Balance of my time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentleman. He yields back. The chair now recognizes a representative from New York, Representative Clark, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Matsui, for holding this important hearing today. It is a long overdue hearing given the issues at NTIA. Access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband is no longer a luxury. It is an absolute necessity for economic survival, education, even healthcare in our increasingly digital society. When Congress passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, we made an historic $42 billion investment in the BEAD program with a clear statutory mandate to build sustainable, future-proof networks and close the digital divide once and for all. Unfortunately, under Administrator Roth's leadership, the NTIA has systemically undermined those goals. By spending 18 months restructuring the program to the benefit of the president's political benefactor, NTIA has created a chaotic environment where states are forced to stall deployment and taxpayers are left wanting longer for inferior service. Most alarmingly, NTIA has effectively abandoned its statutory commitment to priority broadband projects using high-quality fiber infrastructure, aggressively shifting focus towards temporary satellite options while refusing to enforce statutory low-cost service options for struggling families. To rush to subsidize billionaires and now a trillionaire has led to the abandonment of public interest by this administration and may only serve to solidify a new era of digital redlining. Administrator Roth, historical redlining in the analog age is sadly being directly mirrored today by digital redlining in broadband accessibility during your tenure at NTIA. The BEAD program was structured so that the states would propose the affordable low-cost service options for low-income families. Congress wrote that into law, and yet your agency is prohibiting the states from having any say in what the low-cost option should be and letting the ISPs set the option themselves. If NTIA refuses to let the states ensure that the low-cost option internet service providers are offering is actually at an affordable rate, how can you claim that you are fulfilling your mission? Is there any cost for a low-cost option that you would consider to be too high? Or what tools do states have to ensure that low-cost options is in fact affordable? What specific guardrails is the NTIA utilizing right now to ensure that low-income and minority communities are not digitally redlined out of this historic infrastructure build-out?
I agree with you that broadband should be affordable. Our job is to implement the law, and Congress has precluded from regulating rates. And I think that's attributable to a broad recognition in data that rate regulation harms investment. In contrast, competition has been hugely successful in promoting broadband affordability. And you even just take fixed wireless, one of the greatest and fastest sources of broadband competition and affordability in home broadband markets. I think that that's why we focus so much on clearing the runway to innovation, ensuring that BEAD isn't putting its thumb on the scale. After all, one of the most, competition has been the most effective source in bringing down prices. I know that, sometimes, subsidies can be one way of looking at it, but we take a more broad approach. One of the best ways that we can use our authorities to promote affordability is through expanding access to spectrum, getting better services into the marketplace. And I think that our nation's historic approach to innovation and facilities-based competition is just evident in the amount of incredible innovation.
Administrator, I've only got like 30 seconds left. I'd like to discuss that further with you. That sounds great, but in the practical application of it, it does not pan out that way. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady for yielding back. The chair now recognizes the representative from California, Mr. Obernolte, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Administrator Roth, thank you for your testimony today. I think you've heard some bipartisan frustration with the slowness of the rollout of BEAD funding. And to be clear, this frustration predates your tenure in the agency. It predates this administration. It's been frustration across the aisle with both Democrat and Republican administrations, and this is in red and blue states. So I hope that you're taking this to heart. This is an indication when you hear this kind of frustration across the aisle that it's not a problem with one state or another state, it's a problem with the system. And this funding is critical to getting broadband connectivity rolled out to our constituents. And I'm hoping that you will take this to heart and try and eliminate some of the bottlenecks so we can get this funding flowing, because that was our intent when we appropriated it. I was very happy to hear you talk about freeing up 500 megahertz of spectrum in your opening testimony. We all know the strain that spectrum is under. I've seen some very alarming projections that say that if nothing is done by the year 2030, just 4 years from now, that over 50% of peak traffic will not have spectrum available, particularly as AI puts more and more demands on that. So I'm very happy that NTIA is focused on that. I wanted to ask specifically about the 2.7 gigahertz band. In HR 1 last year, we directed NTIA to work with stakeholders to clear that spectrum and gave you auction authority for that. Could you tell us a little bit about when you think that that auction might occur?
Thank you for your question, and I agree that we need to get the 2.7 gigahertz band identified as quickly as possible so that it can get auctioned and that providers can, and that it can benefit the commercial marketplace. We're working around the clock on to do our part to get spectrum identified. I'm grateful that soon the incumbent agencies will have access to their spectrum relocation funds, so that we can complete our critical engineering work to have a successful auction. And we're working closely with the FCC on timelines and figuring out ways to expedite the process of seeing that spectrum auction just as soon as possible.
Do you think that that might occur by the end of your tenure in the agency?
We're working towards that outcome.
Okay, I'm glad to hear it. I was also very happy to hear you talk about FirstNet reauthorization in your opening testimony. That's something that's critically important to me as someone with a very rural district with a critical need for first responders to be able to communicate. One of the things that I have been a little frustrated by is the fact that FirstNet does not currently interface with any of the low Earth orbit satellite operators. As you know, Starlink, for example, already has direct to cell phone operational capability, and others will soon have that capability. It seems crazy that we're not enabling our first responders to use that. Can you talk a little bit about what NTIA and Congress can do to make sure that new commercial satellite systems are available to first responders through FirstNet?
I agree that first responders should have access to the best technology available. That's FirstNet's mission, to maximize public safety outcomes for the public and for first responders. And I think part of that is really empowering the FirstNet board to determine which investments are needed to maximize public safety outcomes. And I applaud this committee's work on FirstNet. One of the things that the legislation that you've advanced does is clarify roles and responsibilities and really empower public safety's role in increasing public safety seats on the board, improving institutional expertise through staggered terms, as well as really clarifying that public safety is responsible for identifying the strategic use of funding and ensuring that it's public safety that drives the budget and the setting of priorities. And then NTIA can conduct its contract oversight and performance accountability to ensure that those priorities are being carried out. And thanks to our work, Secretary Lutnick was able to, our oversight, we were able to secure an additional $2 billion in value for FirstNet under the contract.
We'll keep working with you on that. My time has expired. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, gentleman, for yielding back. The chair now recognizes the representative from California, Representative Barragan, for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Roth, you are nominated by the president, correct?
Correct.
And and the president can fire you, correct?
Correct.
So you serve at the pleasure of the president and work for the president.
Yes.
Is it safe to say that since you've been confirmed by the Senate, you've spoken to the president?
I'm not going to get into the.
I'm not asking you to get into the conversation. I'm asking you if you have had a conversation with the president since you've been confirmed. That's it. It's a yes or no. You're a lawyer. You know this.
Yeah, no, I think that it would be inappropriate for me to, speak to internal deliberations. Obviously, we speak to.
I'm not
White House.
asking for an internal deliberation. It's a simple question. Whether you've spoken to the president is a yes or no. Asking you about the content of that is a different question. Have you spoken to the president?
I have met the president.
Okay.
But I'm not
For
going
whatever reason, you're afraid to say whether you've actually spoken to the president. That is actually concerning because it's a very simple yes or no. You as an attorney know. If I'm asking about the content of a conversation, that could be attorney-client privilege. That's a different question. And you wouldn't instruct your client not to answer whether you've even spoken to a lawyer. So it's extremely frustrating that this hearing, you have just been talking through answers, not answering questions, but kind of like avoiding some of them. Okay, so you may or you've not spoken to the president. Has anybody asked you to hold up the California application for BEAD money?
No, and we're working actively to get California's application approved.
Okay, I know you're working actively. I've heard that. But I find it a little hard to believe that the two states that haven't been approved are some of the two bluest states that we've got. And you have 54 other states and territories that have already met the requirements. Is California being held to a different standard than the other states you've already approved?
No, in fact, that's precisely what we're working on, is ensuring that California gets held to the same standards that we've held other states to.
Okay, has the NTIA communicated their concerns to California in writing?
We have certainly communicated our concerns to California, and I can't speak to I can't speak to our deliberations with the state, but we have certainly
So you're unaware.
Communicated those concerns to
You're
California.
unaware if they're in writing. What does California need now? What they need now really is certainty. Communities can't plan broadband projects around uncertainty, and they can't connect families with funds that haven't been approved. So I would urge you and the NTIA to move quickly to resolve any of these remaining issues that you're saying California has had. So, Administrator, I want to move on to another topic. The Digital Equity Act created two major grant programs: the State Capacity Grant Program, which helps states expand digital access for local libraries, schools, and nonprofits, and the Competitive Grant Program, which awards grants directly to community organizations. Last year, the Trump administration canceled both. Now the Justice Department says in court, the Competitive Grant Program can move forward if a race-related provision of the law is severed. Does NTIA believe the State Capacity Grant Program can also move forward?
On the advice of my legal, at the advice of my legal counsel, I can't discuss the digital equity program as it's currently in active litigation. I can speak to the Native Entities Grant Program funding that we recently provided guidance on in a new NOFO.
Okay, California was awarded more than $70 million in state capacity grant funding to help more people afford access and use high-speed internet before the Trump administration canceled the program. Now, Republican-led states like Texas, Florida, Alabama, and Louisiana also had millions. The communities across the country deserve a clear answer and a path forward for all of the digital equity grants programs. It's been extremely frustrating at some of the responses or non-responses, and it's been extremely frustrating at the lack of speed in the deploying the BEAD dollars. Now, it was said, people were frustrated in the last administration, but then this administration came in and just took even longer and made it more delay. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Representative Cammack.
Thank you,
For 5
Mr.
minutes.
Chairman. I appreciate it, and thank you to our guest for being here today. I'm just going to jump right into it. I know we've had several conversations, and you know I'm the wife of a first responder back in Florida, so this issue is near and dear to me. So chairing the Next Gen 911 caucus, I know firsthand how critical our reliable emergency communications are and where so many of our gaps exist. So I noted in your testimony that updated NTIA estimates show nationwide Next Gen 911 implementation costs have fallen significantly, down to between 5.8 and 9.27 billion, which is candidly a major shift from prior estimates. Given that lower cost estimate, what do you see is the biggest barrier to nationwide deployment right now? And how can we make sure that our states and localities have the flexibility and support that they need in order to finish the job?
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Cammack, and it was so great to meet with you in your office, and I applaud your leadership on public safety issues, which are obviously near and dear to your heart. So, you know, I visited 911 centers firsthand, and I've seen the benefits of AI tools and modernization of technology to improve location data and dispatch and ultimately better outcomes for public safety. I think that some of the obstacles that we've seen are, you know, obstacles that come to interoperability and ensuring that different jurisdictions are able to talk to each other, that data is able to flow with calls, and ultimately get better resilience and response times. You know, and also one of the other challenges is that some states have invested significantly in NG 911 and others have not. I know that the legislation that the committee has advanced takes account of that reality. But we stand ready to help the committee in its efforts to advance this critical priority, and we did that through our recently released study on nationwide implementation costs.
Well, and let me jump to the kind of dovetailing into that. So we've obviously seen that there are challenges. You highlighted interoperability just now and how it can be fragmented across different agencies and programs. And we talked about the legislation that we had introduced, the Public Safety Communications Act, which would create a dedicated Office of Public Safety Communications within NTIA. And we did that because currently it is not codified. We want to see this codified so we can streamline a lot of the efforts that are being undertaken at the moment and also strengthen accountability. So from your perspective, yes or no, would creating a permanent dedicated office within NTIA improve coordination, accountability, and long-term strategic planning for public safety communications? Yes or no?
Yes.
And what would you say is the biggest gap within the current structure?
Thank you. I appreciate your focus on this. I think that elevating public safety communications is obviously a core responsibility of ours, and so codifying the office would certainly put increased emphasis and focus on this area, especially as we enhance our oversight of FirstNet, engage in NG 911 improvements. And so I would welcome the opportunity to work with you on this legislation and strengthening our public safety role.
Absolutely. Well, and just for the record, if this legislation were to be signed into law, it would help ensure that our first responders have access to resilient, reliable communications, especially when lives are on the line, correct?
Certainly, yes.
Excellent. Well, that about does it on my end. You answered all my questions. So thank you again for your time today, and thank you for appearing before the committee. With that, I